So you have finished a draft of your novel. That's amazing. I hope that you're celebrating. But now here comes the hard part, revisions. And if you're anything like me, you might be staring at that messy draft thinking, this is way too overwhelming. I don't even know where to start. I have been there more times than I can count, where I open my draft, feel a pit in my stomach, and want to abandon the whole thing because it just felt impossible. But one thing I have learned is that staying motivated through drafts is not just about willpower. It's about one simple shift. And once I learned this, I was able to finish my drafts instead of quit them. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. Hello writers, welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Kaylee. I'm a writing coach, the creator of Writer Die magazine, and an agented novelist. And as I'm filming this right now, my novel is out on submission in the hopes that it will be published. And I had to write draft after draft after draft of that book before I even got an agent, and again when working with my agent to get this book ready to go out on submission. And what I have come to realize over the years is that revision as opposed to drafting is actually one of my favorite parts of the process. Now, I'm not saying that it's easy, it's very far from it, but I love how each draft reveals something different to me as the writer and continues to enhance and sharpen the story. Even though it can be very frustrating at times, I also find it so rewarding. So let's dive into that shift that I owe my love of revision to. So the shift is this: stop trying to fix everything at once. Instead, give each draft one clear job. When you stop expecting a single revision to magically fix your characters, your story arc, your pacing, your world building all at once, that overwhelm disappears and you're able to see things a lot more clearly. And that's what keeps you able to move forward instead of giving up. One of the ways I like to visualize this, as silly as it might sound, as a picture in a coloring book before you color it. Your first draft or your early drafts are just that outline, that vague sketch. And with every draft, you're going in and you're fixing something and you're shading in more and more until you're going to get to your final draft where the picture is complete. For some reason, thinking about that image just reminds me that this is going to take time and that each revision is going to reveal more and more to me until I'm able to see the clear picture. I'm not always going into each draft thinking that I'm going to solve all the problems at once. When you start your revisions, there might be some things that are just glaringly obvious that you need to fix. Say there's a side character that you realize you don't need anymore, or there's a giant plot hole in the middle of the book. That's a great place to start. Follow your instinct and follow that enthusiasm to motivate you to get through the draft. But if you don't know where to start and you feel like so much needs to be fixed or revised, here are some examples of different jobs I have given to my drafts. And I'm also going to share some questions you can ask yourself to help guide you through the process. One big job you can assign this revision is to focus on story arc. So maybe you feel like your story starts in 3 different places, or maybe your inciting incident is all the way on page 80, or you're not really sure when the story gets going. First of all, I want to say I think it's very common to have no idea what your story arc could look like in your first draft or very early drafts, and that is totally okay. This revision can also be seen as another way of discovery and following your curiosities. But if this is the revision you want to spend focusing on the narrative structure of your story, then here are some questions you can ask yourself along the way. What event truly sets my story into motion? If you're familiar with the 3-act structure at all, this can be the catalyst or the inciting incident. This is the moment where things really shift for your main character, where they're going to step out of the world of Act 1 and into the world of Act 2. Where they're going to make a decision that they cannot go back on. So even if you don't know what comes before this moment, I would start your revision here. What sets the story into motion? Find this moment and build from there. Another job you can assign your draft is to just focus on character, or perhaps just your protagonist. Maybe your protagonist feels way too passive and they're not really making any decisions. Or maybe they feel too perfect and that's not going to be relatable for a reader and it's not going to be very fun for you to write either. So for this revision, focus on what are your characters' flaws? What are their desires? What are their secrets? How do these characteristics affect the plot? Are there places in my draft where I can heighten all of this, where I can heighten these secrets, these desires, and these flaws or quirks? Focusing on this will inevitably add context, it will add emotion, and it will add tension, all the things that you need to drive this story forward. Spending time with your antagonist is also a great job you can assign this draft. Maybe your antagonist feels flat, like they're just a bad guy character with no real motive, or maybe you're not sure who your antagonist is or your antagonistic forces, and therefore there's really no tension coming through. So for this draft, think about who or what is standing in the way of my character's wants and needs. That's your antagonist or antagonistic forces. It doesn't even have to be a person. How does this antagonist respond to my main character? What is their motivation and how does that clash with my protagonist? In one of my many drafts, this was huge for me, identifying this antagonistic force. I think I was thinking in terms of that it just had to be a very obvious villain, but once I understood it was actually the mother character in my book, who I loved as a writer and who my protagonist loved, I was able to add so much more context and tension to my draft because I realized this antagonist is just standing in the way of my main character. So find out who is standing in the way of yours and work your way through your draft with that in mind. Another job is to look for pacing. So maybe the middle of the story drags along, or maybe the ending doesn't feel satisfying or feels really rushed. So ask yourself, where are you as the reader skimming? Even as the writer, if you're rushing through scenes or you're skimming because they're boring, if they're boring to you, they're definitely going to be boring to the reader. So where are things not interesting? Where do things slow down? Where does the tension fizzle out? Or are there moments where you can slow down to build that tension or to really make us feel something in our body? Adding sensory detail is always a good idea, especially in this early draft where we're going to be open and we're going to be curious about what's going to happen next. So as you move through this revision, thinking about pacing, where can you slow down? Where can you speed up? And where can you make sure that the tension is alive? One of my favorite things to write is backstory, but a lot of times that is not going to stay in the whole draft. So another job you can assign to this revision is perhaps to focus on backstory and where you have it in the draft. Do you have a 10-page flashback in chapter 1 that completely stalls the story? Or are you info dumping in big chunks instead of weaving it in? Again, in early drafts, there's nothing wrong with adding backstory. I think so much of these early drafts, we call them discovery drafts for a reason, are about figuring out the story for you yourself as the writer. So I know for me, writing out lots of backstory is sort of a fun exercise that I'm getting to know my character, but most of it probably isn't going to stay in your final draft, and I'm willing to bet that each draft you're going to be cutting more and more of it. So you can ask yourself, does this backstory directly affect my main plot? Does the information I'm giving move the story forward? And if it doesn't, cut it. And finally, if you're writing a book with a lot of world building, there's definitely going to be a lot of revisions where you'll be refining how much of that you're going to keep and how much of that you're going to cut. So perhaps the rules of your world aren't clear, like say your magic system contradicts itself in chapter 10 as opposed to what was written in chapter 1. Or maybe you've overloaded the reader with so much detail that doesn't actually add to the plot. So during this revision, ask yourself, what are the rules of this world? Are there any rules I broke without explanation? And do the details I'm adding to this story serve the story or distract from it? I think in those early drafts, of course, explore your curiosity and discover all these new things about the world, but in a revision, go through and make sure it's all aligning and it's all moving the plot forward and serving your story. So I hope these questions you can ask yourself and this idea of assigning jobs to your draft is making you feel a little bit more clear about how to approach it. And just remember that a single job makes the process feel tangible. But I have to say, even with a clear plan, revision can still feel like a slog. So there's one other mindset shift that I want to share with you for when these jobs just feel really heavy. Reconnect with your original desire and intention for your story. What inspired you to write this book in the first place? What excited you? How badly do you want this story to exist? Picture yourself finishing another draft, holding that progress in your hands. There's something about this reconnection that feels really validating, and it has helped me get through multiple drafts, so trust me, it works. And if you want more support, that's exactly what I do inside my After the Draft coaching program. It's designed for writers who are revising a manuscript and want personalized feedback, craft strategy, and support to understand what they have written and what comes next. So if you're curious about that, you can get all the details through the link below. I would love to work on your book with you. And if you'd like to learn more about my revision and drafting process for my first novel, I have this video here, so I'll see you over there or in my next one. Bye.